or some such. We all saw how Andy Burnham was prevented, pushed by the Prime Minister, from even standing for Parliament, yet at the same time Peter Mandelson was promoted. Ways were found around other people standing for fairly minor positions, but a way was found by the Prime Minister and his advisers to push Peter Mandelson over the line into the office of the ambassador to the USA. And I think the reason for that was quite simple, or one of the reasons was a nasty political factionalism. The reason that Peter Mandelson is looked upon so favourably by the Prime Minister and people around him is because he made his name kicking the left in the Labour Party, and he boasted about that. So I believe that clouded their judgment at the very least and meant that they could find ways around what was known in the public domain, find excuses to push him over the line. When this was discussed some time ago in this place, I asked in this chamber many months ago how it was that, given what was known, Lord Mandelson at the time retained the Labour whip, while honourable friends from this side were still suspended from the whip for voting to add scrapping the two-child benefit cap to the government's programme in the King's speech. And I will give way to my honourable friend.
To my honourable friend for giving way. Does he agree with me that if the government is serious about its commitments around transparency, that internal materials, internal communications in the Labour Party that involve Peter Mandelson in any shape or form need to be preserved and be released and be included in any upcoming or ongoing investigations?
Richard Bergen.
I do agree with what my honourable friend says, and I want to put on the record that my honourable friend who just made that very important intervention was treated terribly by this party, by people around the Prime Minister, by people in the party bureaucracy, whilst at the same time these people had found reasons to turn a blind eye or make excuses for what was known. Now I will give way.
Thank the honourable member for giving way. Would you agree with me that really what's at stake here is at a time whenever trust in the country across the UK is at a low, what the public will see, and victims and survivors out there, is the wagons being circled, no matter the party, and that is a very real casualty of this today. Would you agree?
Richard Bergen.
I totally agree with what the honourable member has said, and she's made that point very powerfully indeed. And it's no wonder that trust is at an all-time low in politicians in general, because what this affair also shines a light upon is the role of the rich and powerful, and the relationship between some at the top of politics and some of those richest and most powerful men in the world. Now, Peter Mandelson has always, I would say, had an unhealthy fascination for the super-rich and the powerful. It's, after all, he that said he was intensely relaxed about people becoming filthy rich. But I would contend as well, because I do think that with this serious debate we need full honesty. As I alluded to before, one of the main reasons that Peter Mandelson was let off the hook and eased into one of the most important offices he could be given by the Prime Minister was because of his role in internal Labour Party factional affairs. And that is just completely wrong. I mean, I'll quote Peter Mandelson, who said, "I work every single day in some small way to bring forward the end of his term in office," referring, of course, to the Right Honourable member for Islington North, and that comment was made whilst he was leader of the Labour Party, and Lord Mandelson was a Labour Party member. And I would say that that is a reason he was so grateful for the job that Peter Mandelson did, kicking the left again and again in the Labour Party, that they turned... I will give way shortly. I think the Prime Minister would be really delighted if I did give way, because I'm trying to come to an important point. So the point I'm making is that the reward for that factional role that he boasted about, that he revelled in, the reward for that was that a blind eye was turned to the fact that the Prime Minister knew of the relationship between Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein. The reality is, and I will give way in a second, the reality is that Peter Mandelson wouldn't have made it onto a panel of local election candidates in the Labour Party. Yet he wouldn't have made it into the parliamentary Labour Party as a candidate for the general election. Yet, because of his factional role and his relationship with the super rich that quite frankly stinks, he was eased into the position of ambassador to the United States of America. And that's the truth, whether or not people choose to admit it, and I will give way.
Mike Martin.
I thank him for giving way, and this is an important debate that deals with corruption on an international scale. It deals with victims, women and girls who've been victimised over years. And could I just ask the honourable gentleman to lift his eyes above factional Labour politics and focus on the issues at hand?
The point I'm making, he may not have understood. Maybe that's the Liberal position to these things, I don't know. What I'm talking about is the fact that victims of sexual abuse were put second to factional politics. The point I'm making is that this dirty, grubby, internal factional behaviour overrode these considerations. So, in fact, I don't disagree with him. That's the point I'm making, that these things, the lives of survivors, should have been put first. The risk that Peter Mandelson posed to national security and his deep inappropriateness for the role of USA ambassador should have been put first. So it may be that he misunderstood me, but that's the very point I'm making. And the public deserve the truth. They need to know the full truth. They need to know who argued for Peter Mandelson, despite what is known about his relationship with Epstein, who argued for him to be pushed over the line and put into the role of ambassador to the United States of America, who warned against it, and what was the role of the advisers around the Prime Minister. And I think that is fundamentally important. We can't have a situation that the public quite rightly view as totally unacceptable, because we need to know, and nothing should prevent it, exactly how this happened, because the public are completely baffled and completely disgusted. And the point has been made that we need to clean up our politics. And of course, that means no jobs for the boys when they're completely, deeply inappropriate and deeply unsuitable for it. Of course, that means looking at the role of big money in politics. Mandelson was infatuated by the rich and powerful in the same way that he was infatuated by the factional politics within the Labour Party. And these things resulted in him being appointed to that position despite what was known. And so I'll finish on this. A manuscript amendment may be brought, I don't know. It may satisfy members on this side of the House and on the other side of the House, I don't know. But no manuscript amendment will rub away this crisis. No manuscript amendment, nothing that can be said in this House will remove the fact that the appointment of Peter Mandelson as an ambassador to the United States of America, despite what was admitted was known at the time, is literally indefensible. Literally indefensible. And I think it is really telling that not a single member on any side of the House has tried to defend that today, although they have defended it previously. And so I'll just end on that, and I just want to come back to the point that my honourable friend tried to make. We can't have appointments in this country suborned to people's friendships or the role that they have played in the factions in an internal party. That puts a national interest at risk. It can put national security at risk. The Prime Minister said country first, party second. What we can't have is faction first, country second. And I think that's what happened with the indefensible decision to appoint Peter Mandelson to this important role, despite the fact it was in the public domain that he'd continued his relations with Epstein when Epstein was in prison for soliciting child prostitution.
John Lamont.
Thank you very much. No matter which party we represent, no matter what deeply held differences we have, no matter how different our beliefs are, everyone in this chamber, and indeed anyone who serves the public, does so in the interests of this nation. We all signed up to serve our country, to do the best by Britain. Peter Mandelson has broken that vow. From politicians to civil servants, we all commit to the Nolan principles of public life. We promise to serve the public with integrity, objectivity, selflessness, accountability, openness, honesty. These principles state without qualifications that holders of public office should act solely in the terms of public interest. They state that holders of public office must avoid placing themselves under any obligation to people or organisations that might try inappropriately to influence them in their work. They state that holders of public office should act and take decisions in an open and transparent manner. Peter Mandelson has broken every one of these principles. And we are here, every single member of this House and the other place, swears an oath of allegiance to the Crown. Before we take our seats, we stand here in this very chamber and swear to be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles, his heirs and successors, according to law, so help me God. In years gone by, that oath was, of course, to Her late Majesty the Queen. It is an oath to the Crown, but it is also an oath to this country. It is a solemn pledge of loyalty to this nation and to its people. Peter Mandelson has betrayed that oath and betrayed Britain. The evidence is there for us all to see in the Epstein files. Peter Mandelson distributed critical, sensitive material about this country and its affairs. He conspired to work with foreign elites against this country's interests and against the policy of the government which he served. He gave some of the most privileged information to some very privileged people with the means and power to wield it. His actions could be classed as disloyal and duplicitous, even if the recipient of the information was of good standing. But in this case, the recipient of Peter Mandelson's leaks was a convicted paedophile. Privileged information was passed not only to a very privileged individual, but to a disgraced criminal, a grooming gang master, a grooming gang for the powerful and elite. Perhaps in the fullness of time, Epstein will be viewed as one of the worst grooming gang masters this planet has ever seen. And in doing so, Peter Mandelson has disgraced himself. His actions and his lack of candour are shameful in the extreme. But it's not his actions we should be concerned about. Earlier, I omitted one Nolan principle, the final one, and it is leadership. That is precisely what has been lacking from this government since its formation. This Nolan principle requires public servants to challenge poor behaviour whenever it occurs. Why was Peter Mandelson's behaviour not challenged by the Prime Minister before his appointment? Why was Peter Mandelson allowed to assume a key role when his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein was known?
With my honourable friend,
absolutely.
Grateful to my honourable friend, and he's making a very powerful speech, grounded as it is in Nolan principles. Does he agree with me that if the Prime Minister appointed someone who went on to breach all the Nolan principles and somewhere in a position as serious as that as the Ambassador to the United States, that would be a serious issue to deal with? The fact that he appointed that person who had already broken all the Nolan principles before his appointment, as well as after it, I think it makes the Prime Minister's position untenable.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. I mean, the position of the Prime Minister, particularly after his remarks during Prime Minister's questions earlier, does raise very serious questions about what he knew and when, and why on earth he made that appointment. I've been doing this job as a Member of Parliament since 2017, and previously to that as a Member of the Scottish Parliament for 10 years, so almost 20 years. Throughout that time, I've been aware of the rumours and the speculation about Mandelson. Indeed, he was sacked from Cabinet on 2 occasions for misconduct. Throughout his political life, there have been question marks raised about his credibility, his conduct and his scruples. So why was Peter Mandelson able to get away with distributing sensitive, privileged information while in office? Questions over Peter Mandelson's character and his loyalty to this country have to be answered. I'll give way to the honourable member who... Yes.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. Like him, I have been a member in this place for longer than I care to remember, and throughout that time, I have seen powerful men go unchallenged and cause havoc with our country as a result. He and I will want to change that for good, because this is well beyond any partisan concern. Does he agree with me that now is therefore the time to revisit the role of this House and this place in appointments, in scrutinising, particularly with select committees, and their capacity to object? Too many people have known for too long about a number of controversial characters that they are not fit for public office. It's time to bring back the disinfectants of democracy into that process. Does he agree?
Yeah. I think the obvious question from the honourable lady's point is why on earth did the Prime Minister make that appointment when there was so much information about the toxic nature around Peter Mandelson? What on earth was the Prime Minister doing? And when you have honourable member, the honourable member for Hove, the Secretary, right honourable member for Hove, the Secretary of State doing the rounds, a cabinet member doing the rounds, saying it was worth the risk. So clearly, even within the higher echelons of the Cabinet, not least the Prime Minister, there were concerns about this appointment, yet nobody did anything about it. This individual who had this association with this predator, with this grooming gang master, who was sharing information, who subsequently was caught sharing information with him, sensitive information, should never have been anywhere near that important office of our ambassador to the United States. So there are so many questions from the government that need to be answered, but there's crucial questions that the Prime Minister has to answer. And for me, the Prime Minister's conduct on this is completely unforgivable.
Paula Barker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Firstly, I want to place on record that my thoughts are with the women and girls who were victims of Epstein and his cronies. I'm also deeply concerned with those who suffered incredible loss through the financial crisis in 2008. Madam Deputy Speaker, this House is at its best when we can find common ground and put aside party politics for the good of our country. And I believe that we are seeing that today. And as the Deputy Chair of both the Standards and Privileges Committees, I take that responsibility seriously. And I believe colleagues would say, I always act without fear or favour. Standards in public life and the Nolan principles are not optional to me, and they guide my work every day. As politicians, every single one of us in this place must be guided by them every single day. Our national security is of paramount importance, and I know that nobody in this House would want to undermine that. During the Hillsborough Law debate, it was made clear that there are existing legal protections for national security. At moments like this, we are reminded of the importance of the desperate need for the Hillsborough Law and a duty of candour. And during this debate today, it has been clear that allowing the ICS to have oversight is unquestionably the way forward. And at a time when public trust and confidence is at an all-time low with politicians and politics, we must individually and collectively lead the way and assure the public there is no hiding place for those who seek to betray our country for their own individual greed. Mandelson has a checkered history within my party. Some might say he has been a cat with 9 lives, being sacked from numerous positions. I cannot think of a more self-serving and self-absorbed politician than Peter Mandelson. A man who, whilst leaking market-sensitive information to a convicted paedophile and sex offender, whilst the country queued outside banks and building societies, wondering if their life savings had gone. A man who has benefited so much from being in this nauseous, disgusting web, he can't even remember his account being credited with $75,000. A man who had no respect for our national security and international relations because his nose was firmly in the trough. And I also think, as a party, we must investigate the culture and those that have enabled Peter Mandelson to thrive for decades, constantly putting his own needs above those of our country and party. Leadership is about integrity, principle and vision. These are the values of my Labour Party, and we must embody them now more than ever. And I'm really sad to say that I am ashamed of the amendment that was laid today. And I think that we have to do much, much better, Madam Deputy Speaker. So I implore my government to withdraw their amendment and let the ICS deal with the issues, because that is the right thing to do. Therefore, Madam Deputy Speaker, if it is not withdrawn, it is with a heavy heart that I must vote against my government amendment today. And I have written to the Chief Whip earlier today to let him know of my intentions. I will give way.
There are rumours about that there may be some kind of manuscript amendment that brings something forward that members opposite do feel they can vote for. But does she agree with me that the fact that the government were willing to try and make Labour members opposite vote for the original amendment is something they should not forget?
Paula Barker.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his intervention, and I think I've made it clear what I think of the government amendment. I will end by saying, as my honourable friend did, the Prime Minister said consistently during the general election campaign that we must always put country before party. He promised the country that this Labour government will put country before party. I implore my government to ensure that that is what they do today.
Well said. Yeah, well said.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And this debate is crucial, it's seminal, but first of all, it's got to be, first and foremost, about the victims of the horrible web that Epstein created, the abuse of women, the abduction of women, the raping of women, the secret imprisonment of women, and them apparently flown in and out of major cities around the world for the convenience of rich and powerful men. Utterly disgusting, depraved and abominable behaviour at every single level. And every member that's called that out is absolutely right to do so. Epstein wasn't revealed yesterday, he wasn't convicted last week, he wasn't convicted last year, he was first convicted 18 years ago. It's not as if his record wasn't extremely well known. And it seems that we're now only debating it because of the inclusion of Peter Mandelson in all of this ghastly, nasty, vile, horrible web that was created by them. And so I think we do have a duty to do something important today, and I, for one, support the opposition motion that's been put forward, and I hope it is voted on, and we don't come to some crabby deal between the government and the opposition today to get a manuscript motion that kicks the whole thing into the long grass, long way away, on the pretence that we cannot discuss it because it might affect security or might affect international relations. Almost anything can affect international relations, and that to me sounds like a way in which the government would simply try and get out of it. The question is, fundamentally, one for the Prime Minister, and it's a bit odd that he's not here for the debate. It's a bit odd that he hasn't spoken in the debate. It's a bit odd that all he's done is said what he did today at Prime Minister's question time. I cannot believe that when he was about to appoint Peter Mandelson as the ambassador to Washington, he wasn't made fully aware of all of Peter Mandelson's record. He would have known the number of times Peter Mandelson was forced to resign, even from the Tony Blair government, because of his behaviour. He would have known all of that. He would have known Mandelson's record as an EU commissioner. He would have known Mandelson's record of an interesting relationship with global dealers in minerals and many other things. He would have known all of that, and yet he still went ahead, apparently despite Foreign Office and other advice, to appoint Mandelson as the ambassador to Washington. What a shame, what a disgrace, and what an appalling appointment to make. And we still don't even know if Mandelson is still being paid by the Foreign Office for that. And so I think today we've got to be very stern and very clear about this. There needs to be the fullest possible inquiry into all of this. Parliament is not competent to undertake this inquiry. The Cabinet Secretary is not competent. The civil service machine is not competent, because they've all been ensnared into this gilded, friendly web of Mandelson, the business contacts, the political contacts, the social contacts, under which favours were done, contracts apparently awarded, this ghastly company Palantir trying to get hold of our National Health Service, apparently at the behest of Mandelson and others. None of us here are competent to have that inquiry. That's why I intervened, and I thank those members that did give way earlier on how the inquiry should be conducted. I think it has to be on the basis of something judicially led, independent, and for the most part in the public eye, rather like eventually the government was forced to undertake the Chilcot inquiry into the Iraq War. That's the nearest parallel I can find, because it needs to expose the whole web that Mandelson created and the power play that he operated on within the civil service, within the political establishment, within the media, and so much else. The member for Leeds East made a wonderful and very, very powerful speech, and I thank him for the reference he made to what Mandelson said and did about me when I was leader of the opposition and leader of the Labour Party. I can just confirm to the House, under my leadership, Mandelson had no role, no influence and no part to play, because I do not trust the man, I do not believe the man, and we need to make that very, very clear, because his role in British politics has been basically malign, undermining and essentially a very corrupting influence altogether. And so when we look at our politics, we need to look at the role that big money plays, the role that patronage plays, the role that turning a blind eye to crime plays, because that is what we end up with, the national embarrassment of Mandelson being the ambassador to Washington, apparently on the basis that it was a risk worth taking in order to please Donald Trump, which I don't know if that succeeded in pleasing Donald Trump, but I did notice that at one of Donald Trump's endless press conferences, he couldn't remember who Mandelson was. So I'm not quite sure how big the impact had been on the president. And so today is a day of shame for our politics. It's a day of shame that we've got to this situation where it's now been exposed. Epstein was very, very powerful and very, very wealthy. Obviously, there needs to be more and more examination into that. They've uncovered more files than even Julian Assange managed to uncover in WikiLeaks. And these are going to be read and studied for a long time to come. And there are lots of people all around the world that were dragged into this ghastly web based on dishonesty, based on lies, based on corruption, and based on patronage. It's up to us up to us as MPs to fess up to what's happened and make sure there is a genuinely open, independent inquiry into all of this, and we look ourselves in the mirror about the standards of democracy we have in our society, the standards of patronage that continue within our society. Yes, of course.
I'm extremely grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman who's making a powerful speech, and he referred to his colleague opposite's speech on factionalism, and he made the point that we need an independent inquiry. One of the reasons for that will be the number of staff from Labour Together, a factional group within the Labour Party, who were appointed to civil service posts directly after the general election, including one, I believe, Jess Sargent, to the Cabinet Office's Propriety and Constitution Group. So we shouldn't have anyone opposite on the front bench trying to suggest, oh, don't question the impartiality of the civil service. They undermine the impartiality of the civil service, and we need an independent inquiry if the public are to know we're going to get to the truth.
I think that's a very fair point that the member makes, and of course the role of factions within parties is enormous. We've seen the role that Mandelson played, that Morgan McSweeney's played, and others have played in sidelining, silencing and getting rid of very good active people within the Labour Party, and ultimately it's the Labour Party that loses as a result of it. And I was extremely grateful for the role that Peter Mandelson played in the last election, Islington North. He came along and canvassed and we won with 50% of the vote. And so that's the only useful thing he's done for a very long time that I can remember. But the point the member makes is actually a very fair one, that it is right that ministers and governments should be able to bring political advisers in with them into government. And I remember discussing all this with Tony Benn in the 1970s about his view that the civil service was intrinsically conservative, intrinsically reactionary, and you did need voices in there that were prepared to speak up for an alternative policy. And I think I understand that point. But there has to be a limit somewhere about the role of the political advisor in running the civil service. That's the Rubicon they must not cross. They can advise the minister, that's reasonable, and they may have a very strong view, they may have a very different view to the civil service, that's fair enough. But they should not be there running the civil service, because if we believe in an independent civil service, then we must practice it, even though it's probably quite uncomfortable for ministers at various times. And so I conclude my contribution with this. I say to the government, don't come to some deal today to get past today. Don't just get through today and think, wow, we got through that mess, and they'll put it in their diaries and say, horrible day in the Commons, but tomorrow's another day, we'll move on. No. Let's have the open public inquiry that's necessary. Let's have the understanding that we are going to turn the page on the era of patronage, of the close relationship between commercial pressure groups and lobbying in the Lords and here and all around the media in our society, and really strive to build that open, fair, democratic society that we should all believe in. Those that suffered in order to gain universal suffrage and democracy didn't do that so we could develop a corrupt political system. They did it because they wanted an open, democratic, accountable system that worked for the benefit of the poorest in our society as well as everybody else. So let's pass that motion today. No deals, pass the motion, inquire with real seriousness into the horror show that we've heard about.
Order. I must inform the House the manuscript amendment to the Amendment A has been tabled by the Prime Minister, and I have selected that amendment. For the convenience of the House, the manuscript amendment adds the following words to the end of the current amendment, which shall instead be referred to the Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament. Copies of the manuscript amendment are now available in the Vote Office. I will call the Minister to move that amendment formally when winding up the debate. The debate now continues with Dr Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I've been waiting for 3 hours to speak in this debate, and I was wanting to talk about consensus, but it seems that my speech is just one place too late. And I want to start by following on from the member from Islington North and the point he made about recovering Mandelson's pay, or at least stopping the pay being awarded to him. I have to say, constituents in Edinburgh South West want to go further and recover his pension as well. But I do want to start by thanking the opposition front bench for bringing this debate today. I think it's right that we do debate these issues, and I think certainly people in my constituency expect that to happen. In terms of consensus, though, I think where we're at is that the SNP, Greens and Lib Dems back their original humble address. I'm not sure if your party backs it or not, or perhaps the gentleman was just speaking on his own behalf. The Conservatives seem to accept that their humble address was a little bit reckless, and they want to support the involvement of the ISC, and now the government is showing leadership and brought that in. I think that's where we're at. I mean, feel free to correct me. Do you want to correct me? Sorry, they may want to correct me. I'm happy to take an intervention. But I did expect to come here today, Mr. Speaker, and hear a little bit more about what Mandelson may or may not have been getting up to during the era of Alistair Darling and Gordon Brown trying to save our economy. Gordon Brown's a man I have huge respect for, a man of real integrity, and Alistair Darling is a predecessor in my seat. Again, he was a man of great integrity and someone who I really respected. Like Mandelson, I think we can all agree, was the complete opposite of these two great men, these two political leaders of my era. And I don't doubt that once that criminal investigation is completed, there will be a public inquiry that some people are talking about. But I think it's right that we have focused on Mandelson's links with Epstein today, and I think the member for Bolsover made that absolutely clear about why that is so important. Very happy to.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. He's just said that he thinks it's absolutely right that this House focuses on Peter Mandelson's links with Jeffrey Epstein, and I welcome him for suddenly coming to that conclusion. Can I ask him why, then, the Prime Minister felt it necessary to appoint him as the US ambassador when he, after this afternoon's revelation, knew that he still had a relationship with him?
Dr. Tarter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I mean, that's why I'm here in this debate this afternoon, because I want to see these documents released so we can understand what decisions were made. You might not guess it, but you might not guess it. Go for it.
Andrew Snowden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the honourable member for giving way. We know the decision that was making. He was appointed ambassador whilst knowing that there was a relationship with a convicted paedophile, and it was worth the risk. So what is worth the risk? What is the level of relationship that is acceptable with a paedophile? Is it coffee in the morning or dinner at night? What is that level? There should be none with a convicted paedophile.
Scott Arthur.
Hopefully the documents will explain what has happened. Hopefully. I mean, can I just expand on one point? You know, so I know I don't look it, but I've been around for a long time. I can remember Mandelson's first lap, then his second lap, then I'm going to the Lords, and now this third lap. So my general perception of him is not someone I would trust. I wouldn't buy a second-hand car from him. But that's based on my perception of the media. I've not seen the vetting they went through. When the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee went through what the selection procedure was, and I accept that's a procedure that this government's inherited, I thought it was an absolute shambles the way the steps they went through. Nothing what I would expect. I expected much more detail. So hopefully these documents will give us a bit more detail. Happy to give way.
I'm grateful for the honourable member for giving way. He's just said that he wouldn't have bought a second-hand car from Mandelson. So would he have made him ambassador to the United States?
Based on my knowledge of him, absolutely not. But I've not seen the vetting documents as insubstantial as they appear. I've not seen them.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. Given the fact that he would not have appointed, rightly I think, he would not have appointed Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the United States of America, does he have any confidence that the Prime Minister, one, made the right decision at that point, or can make the right decision on any other national security issue ever again?
Take care. Dr Scott Arthur.
We heard from the Prime Minister at lunchtime at length today, at the Prime Minister's questions time. We're going to release this information. That's a chance for people to look at this. I think we can speculate and speculate, but what this debate is about today is about releasing this information into the public domain so people can be reassured that the right decision has been made. And if it's not, we can question it. Do you want to?
Still a Creasy.
For giving way. He was here earlier when I raised the possibility of how we learn not just to deal with this situation, and I am with colleagues who are not happy about the amendments that were originally proposed, but also what we can do fundamentally, because the truth is this is not the first time that we have seen controversial people appointed to positions. Does he, as a relatively new MP, share my interest in learning from other jurisdictions around the world where you have pre-appointment hearings by, say, for example, select committees that can object to a shortlist, that we toughen up the role of this place in being the eyes and ears about what good democracy practice looks like?
Dr Scott Arthur.
I have to say, Mr Speaker, I really thank the Honourable for that point, but the description of the vetting procedure described by the Chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee just seems so insubstantial to me. So absolutely right, we have to do much better. I'm in the process of recruiting a community engagement officer, and it felt like we had more rigour in appointing that person in terms of checking the background than the process that was described. I mean, I do have to accept perhaps I might have understood the process that was described. So it's right that we have focused on Mandelson's links with Epstein, absolutely. But I'm also reflecting on the fact that if Mandelson wasn't included in this data release at the weekend, perhaps we would have been speaking about Andrew Windsor and Sarah Ferguson today as well. And I think they are perhaps the winners in this. Another point. Earlier, I was guilty of saying the member for Edinburgh South had misread the room in terms of how he was presenting his arguments. But he was right in one point. He was right when he said that Mandelson is a traitor. And I think, hopefully, meant not just a traitor to the UK, but also a traitor to the survivors of sexual abuse from Epstein and survivors of sexual abuse everywhere, actually. So I really do think that residents in Edinburgh South West and everywhere expect us to work together on this today and reach consensus. And hopefully we can do that. I'm still not sure that the Lib Dems, SNP and the Greens are on board yet, but I think we're coming much closer together. And I think... So, because it seemed that, apologies, it seems that the SNP Greens and Lib Dems perhaps were wanting to back the original humble address rather than including the ISC being involved in the process. That was my understanding.
Lisa Smart.
Mr Speaker, I'm very grateful for him letting me intervene. I said explicitly in my remarks from the Lib Dem front bench that I welcomed the Minister's openness to the ISC being part of this. So I'm glad he gave me the opportunity to clarify.
Really grateful for the correction. As ever, perhaps I wasn't listening quite as carefully as I should have been. So I really do thank you. So I'll just end by thanking our front bench for, I think, listening to the arguments from this side and from right across the chamber, showing a bit of leadership and hopefully bringing us together with some consensus. Oh, go for it, go for it.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way. His speech is coming across to me as quite miraculous and not in a good way, in that he is claiming that his front bench have shown leadership this afternoon. Let's say to the House exactly what's happened. His leadership and his front bench have changed and amended this legislation today, or the motion today, because they knew that the people over there wouldn't have voted for the original one.
No, can we just reflect for a second? I think the original humble address was reckless. It was going to put information which would have damaged our country into the public domain. And what the minister, and you can argue that the minister's original amendment perhaps was an overreaction to that. But we're getting to a good place now. We're reaching consensus. Very happy, Tim Trice.
Specific point of our amendment then, had all things been equal, would he have voted gone through the I lobby or the no lobby when that division was called?
Lord Scott Arthur.
I had complete confidence in the minister reaching consensus within the House today. But I would, but seriously, look, would members opposite voted for their own motion today, which would have put that sensitive information in the public domain? I really doubt it. I really doubt it. I think better of them. Thank you.
Very quickly, I think our motion was very and is very, very clear. And we do know when it comes to the IEC and how evidence and information is brought forward. My point, Mr Speaker, was very clear. Would he have come with us on that motion, or would he have gone against it?
Scott Arthur.
Mr. Speaker, I'm trying to sit down. I'll do so. Right, I'll do so. I'll do so.
Marvellous, Sir John Whittingdale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've had some very powerful speeches in this debate, and actually I think it's a credit to this House that we are discussing this issue and the appalling behaviour of Jeffrey Epstein in a way that is not being discussed in Washington. However, what we have heard in the last few days has been truly shocking. The photos, the emails, the revelations of the very close nature that Peter Mandelson had with Jeffrey Epstein, which actually now raises questions potentially of criminality and even treason. But beyond that, actually what the House is asking is how was it that somebody who was already established to have had to resign twice from government in disgrace, who had questions over his performance in the European Commission, and then was known to have maintained a very close friendship with a convicted paedophile. How did that man ever come to be regarded as an appropriate appointee as our ambassador in Washington? That was one of the issues, and that was the critical issue which the Foreign Affairs Committee was anxious to examine. We did repeatedly ask that Peter Mandelson come before the committee. He did not. We were told eventually that we had had an opportunity to speak to him briefly over breakfast when we were in Washington, and therefore that was sufficient. It was not sufficient. We were not able to ask him any of the questions. We did subsequently have the opportunity to ask those questions of the Permanent Under-Secretary of the Foreign Office and the Cabinet Secretary. And the Chair of the committee has already set out some of the issues that were raised. But I think it is worth repeating. We were told that in the appointment of Lord Mandelson, there were 3 parts, that the process consisted of 3 stages. The first stage, because this was a political appointment at the direct instruction of the Prime Minister, therefore there was no interview panel, there was no fireside chat, which would normally take place between the appointing minister and the candidate. Instead, the Foreign Office was told that this was the wish of the Prime Minister. And instead, he was asked to fill in a conflict of interest form in order to understand his private interests that might have some conflict with his position. I give way to Mark.
I'm very grateful for the Right Honourable Gentleman for giving way. The Prime Minister made a huge deal about a process having gone through when he was answering questions from the Leader of the Opposition earlier today. If I understand him correctly, is it that the process was the Prime Minister wanted Peter Mandelson?
That was made absolutely clear right from the start. Indeed, the Permanent Under-Secretary described this as a political appointment which was the direct instruction of the Prime Minister. But I do want to just go through the 3 stages. So this first stage, the conflict of interest form, as the chair of the Select Committee actually brought out, essentially what this consisted of was Peter Mandelson being asked to fill in a form and to choose what to put down on it. And there was no subsequent questioning about anything that did not appear on his form. The form, of course, is something that we have not seen, and I hope that as part, indeed, I believe that as part of the motion which we are likely to pass today, that form should now be made public. Also, as a part of the potential conflict of interest, I did raise with the Permanent Under-Secretary the question of Lord Mandelson's continuing shareholding in Global Council. The Permanent Under-Secretary replied to me, "This was honestly the hardest bit of the process for both of us. Lord Mandelson was a founder of the company. While he was confident that he could conduct his role as ambassador without giving rise to a conflict, we wanted to make sure we mitigated that possibility in some ways. So the conclusion was not that Lord Mandelson should dispose of his shareholding. Instead, there were some Chinese walls put in place which would ensure that he wasn't aware of who the clients of Global Counsel were, or indeed the work being undertaken. And I listened with concern to the speech from my honourable friend on the front bench about the meeting that took place with Palantir. I think that that raises real questions about the effectiveness, just one second, the effectiveness of the so-called undertakings that were put in place by the Foreign Office, and we need to understand that. Of course I get it.
Thank you for allowing me, but I rise with incredulity to learn that the interest was there was not a requirement to dispose of the interest. I recall going through ethics and propriety when being made a minister that it would be entirely inappropriate to hold things. I know of colleagues who had to dispose of interest. Would you agree with me that if the noble Baroness Grey was perhaps still running propriety and ethics, something like this would not have happened?
Sir John Whittingham.
I completely share the view of my right friend. Like her, I too went through a process in which I was required to get rid of rather smaller shareholding interests than the one held by Lord Mandelson. But this is just one of a huge range of questions to which we need to know the answer. The second stage of the process.
Moves on from that stage. Thank you.
Alicia Kearns.
One other appointment we've had, and some might argue he is the de facto Foreign Secretary, is the National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell. How can we have confidence that he went through the appropriate vetting, not least when he's running around having secret meetings with Wang Yi and other Chinese senior officials, when we cannot have confidence that it was done in the American ambassador, our ambassador to America?
John Whittingham.
Well, I mean, I think once we get the revelations of the documents as to precisely what occurred in the case of Lord Mandelson, that is bound to raise questions about what procedures were followed in the case of other appointees, and particularly the one that she raises, Jonathan Powell, who in many ways is the Foreign Secretary of this country. The second stage of the process, we were told, was the due diligence carried out by the Cabinet Office. The due diligence consisted of identification of information and a second part of it, which was judgment about it. However, all of the information that was obtained in the due diligence was actually in the public domain already. There was no additional investigation take place. It was simply, essentially, an internet trawl. That report, the due diligence report, was presented to the Cabinet Secretary for onward transmission to the Prime Minister. However, even at that time, actually, due diligence through an internet trawl would have already shown up the fact that Peter Mandelson had been to stay in the townhouse belonging to Jeffrey Epstein after his conviction. So the continuing association after his conviction had already been reported in the press and therefore was bound to form a part of the due diligence process. And the question which has been raised several times in this debate already, which is when the appointment was made, did the Prime Minister know? And we understand that potentially he did, which I assume was contained in the due diligence report. That was put directly to the Cabinet Secretary. Did you tell the Prime Minister about Mandelson staying in the Manhattan townhouse when Epstein was in jail? And all that the Cabinet Secretary said to us was, I will consider whether there is further information that can be shared and write to the committee. We have never had a full answer to that question. And then the third part of the process was the developed vetting, which we are told is a usual process for very senior appointments. It consists of a wide range of different investigations. We're told it's staff files, company records checks, check of spent and unspent criminal records, credit history, a check of security service records, and an interview not just of the candidate but also of the referees would have been supplied by a trained investigating officer. I think we will need to see the outcome of that report, even if it can only be provided, as the government has now conceded, to the Intelligence and Security Committee. But taken together with those three processes, the Prime Minister still decided there was no obstacle to the appointment of Peter Mandelson as Ambassador to the United States. We then come to the question put to him, Prime Minister's questions, following the Bloomberg report of the large number of emails. The Foreign Office learnt of those emails the night before Prime Minister's questions, and I pressed the Permanent Under-Secretary as to whether or not Number 10 had been told that these emails contained material evidence which could potentially change the whole perception of Lord Mandelson's relationship. He said that he had a duty of care to Lord Mandelson, and therefore he needed to make checks. He essentially told us that Number 10 had not been informed. I find that very hard to believe. As somebody who used to prepare the Prime Minister for answering questions, the idea that something was not told to the Prime Minister of that order seems absolutely extraordinary. But there is another question which I think needs to be asked. The British government say that they discovered of all these emails which proved that the relationship was very long-standing and much closer than had ever been admitted by Lord Mandelson. They discovered them because Bloomberg obtained copies in a leak. They were held by the US government in the Department of Justice for months. The US government knew all about them, but it was only when we're told Bloomberg obtained them that the British government found out.
Will you give way on that point?
Of course I will.
Do you believe it's conceivable then that the government did not ask, is there any compromat on the US ambassador, the British ambassador, to become the US ambassador on that basis? Because it seems incredulous that this has been known about, as he rightly pointed out in his speech, for years.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and I think there are two possible questions. The first is, why didn't the British government ever ask the US government, who they knew had all this material from Jeffrey Epstein, whether it contained any additional information that might be relevant to the appointment of Peter Mandelson? Or equally, our relationship, we are told, with the United States is so close. We share intelligence. Is it really the case that they didn't feel it necessary to tell us? Either way, it is an appalling breakdown of communication, and I have to say I find it very difficult to believe. These are all questions which we pressed the Permanent Under-Secretary on, that we pressed the Cabinet Secretary on, and we failed to obtain any answers. And I have to say that my confidence in a further investigation by the Cabinet Secretary is actually influenced by his failure, really, to answer any of these questions when he came before the Select Committee the first time.
Would my right honourable friend give way?
Of course I can.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way. Once the Bloomberg leak had been done, I'm sure my right honourable friend remembers that many of us asked the government, surely now that these things have turned out to be true, surely we should now turn Lord Mandelson, Peter Mandelson, inside out, as if he had become outed as a spy. And surely the things which have now been released over the weekend would have come out. Is he surprised, like I am, that the government did not seem to do the investigation into Peter Mandelson subsequent to him being fired?
I completely share the astonishment expressed by my honourable friend. And as further revelations come out about the behaviour of Jeffrey Epstein, particularly in relation to his links with Russia and other hostile powers, you'd have thought then again the government would say, please, if there is anything involving Peter Mandelson, we wish to know about this. The potential damage to our national interests that may have occurred as a result of Lord Mandelson's continuing to feed information to Jeffrey Epstein is huge, and that is something which has not yet even begun to be properly exposed.
With my honourable friend, I'm grateful to my honourable friend. In his interrogation of the Permanent Under-Secretary of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office and the Cabinet Secretary, was he able to shed any light on another part of our motion, about whether there was any severance payments made to Lord Mandelson, how much they were, because if there were payments made, we should be seeking to get them back for the taxpayer.
Yeah. My honourable friend is absolutely right and actually anticipates my exact next point in that I asked the question.
Well said.
I asked the question to the Permanent Under-Secretary whether or not he was still on the civil service payroll. I was told he was not. I was asked whether or not a settlement. I asked whether or not a settlement payment had been made, and I was told that he had resigned, but that his contract would be honoured. And when I asked whether or not that included a payment, I was told it was a confidential matter between him and the civil service.
So, yes.
But that I will see if I can actually. Find it, because the exact wording is worth my just quoting again. So I said, so the Foreign Office is not going to give any information as to whether the payment was made to him, to which the Permanent Under-Secretary said, any implications of his termination will be reported in our annual report and accounts, but termination payments below a particular threshold, which I think is £300,000, do not get itemised. So I think the quick answer is no. However, I hope that, again, that is something which the government has now indicated will be made public.
Yeah.
I want to conclude my remarks by saying, of course, I recognise that...
Would he give way just before he concludes?
Yeah.
Just before I do, yeah.
I'm really grateful for the right honourable gentleman for giving way. And I'm just thinking about the response that he got from the Permanent Under-Secretary. Do you think that was a Permanent Under-Secretary trying to be helpful to his committee? Or do you think that was obfuscation and telling elected members of Parliament to get their nose out of his business?
Say to my old friend, I regarded the whole session as a sort of masterpiece in Sir Humphrey speak. It was an awful lot of words conveying very little substance. But I just want to come back to this point. I absolutely understand the necessity of not revealing information that may be damaging to national security. But I think, as one or two members have already said, actually transparency is really important here. And therefore, I hope that the government will make public as much as is possible. And certainly as a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I will be pressing that the committee look at this, all the information that is published, and follow up on the rather unsatisfactory session that we already had. Madam Deputy Speaker, I just want to conclude with my overall impression, having looked at this process in some depth. It was clear that the Prime Minister wanted Peter Mandelson to be our ambassador in the United States. The Foreign Office had to conduct the usual procedures, and we heard about the three parts of the process. But I believe that the message was very clearly sent to the Foreign Office: go through your motions, but make sure that it ends up with his approval being granted. And that has been the overriding impression, that to some extent boxes were ticked, but the Foreign Office were told very clearly he is to be the next ambassador. And that was a direct instruction of the Prime Minister.
Andrew Lewin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I must start by putting on record my horror at the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein, as so many honourable members have done today. This man is a paedophile and a perpetrator of evil acts. The pain of the victims and their families must be unimaginable. And I want to pay tribute to the speech made by my honourable friend, the member for Bolsover, earlier today, which was incredibly brave and powerful, and my words cannot match hers, but if you were not in the chamber, I urge all colleagues to watch that speech. I think it's clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the House is united in disdain at the actions of Lord Mandelson. And it was always my intention to speak briefly this afternoon, and it was always my intention to talk about this being an opportunity for the House to come together. Because I think it's unmistakably the case that when we talk to our constituents, so often people will say, why don't you talk to each other like human beings? Why don't you respect to each other? Why don't you respect each other? Why is this place a pantomime so often? But it isn't always the case, and today it absolutely has not been the case. We do respect each other. I've been here for 18 months. I have the humility to say I have much to learn about this place, but there are many people on all sides of this chamber who I admire greatly. And this afternoon, just to call out a few of them, the member for North Dorset's speech, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, the very important intervention of the former Deputy Prime Minister, which we'll come to a little bit later, the interventions from the member for Rutland and Stamford. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is not just today that we listen to each other and should listen to each other. One example, members who know me will know I'm a passionate pro-European, I define as a social democrat and internationalist. Some will cheer that, others will not. One who probably would not, and is not in this place today, is the member for Chingford and Woodford Green. There isn't a huge amount that we would agree on, but whenever he speaks on international affairs, I do my utmost to come and listen to him because of the experience that he has in this House. And I'm very surprised to see he's not in his place today, but the member for Strangford, the only thing that matches his number of interventions, in Westminster Hall, is his decency as a man and as a parliamentarian. So I wanted to put all of that on the record. The focus today, of course, though, rightly has been on on Mandelson. There is unity in contempt for his actions, the scandalous and the brazen way in which government information was leaked, how we undermined the government and his colleagues seemingly at every turn. His actions will offend every British citizen, every public servant and every member of this House. It's why decisive action was needed, and it's why this debate this afternoon was so important. I do wholeheartedly welcome the decision that has been made and proposed by the government that the Intelligence and Security Committee will determine which documents are released. And I want to commend the courage of those who made that argument earlier today, not knowing if they would be successful in making their case, but also the courage of the government to accept those recommendations. I will.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way on that point, and he has articulated very eloquently how we have come together in this House, both to roundly condemn the role that Mandelson has played in the corrupt web around Jeffrey Epstein, but also that we have come out to say together we must have all the full facts laid bare, and I hope that he will join me in congratulating the government on conceding and putting forward the amendment for independent scrutiny by the IFC so that they will oversee the disclosure of the appropriate documents.
Thank you. I wholeheartedly agree with my honourable friend, and that's why I began my remarks by saying this has been an important day for this House, because I sincerely believe that we are collectively in a much better place now than we were when we started the debate. I will.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way and for the tone of the speech that he is giving. He talks about us having moderate language and being representatives of our constituents, and I agree with him. But in addition to that, we are elected to this place, hopefully because of our judgment and the trust of our electorate. Now, whatever the outcome of this debate and whatever the outcome of those documents, we already know that the public knew, the media knew, our constituents knew, we all knew, and we discovered at about 12 o'clock today, the Prime Minister knew that Lord Mandelson had a close personal relationship with a convicted paedophile. Does he think the Prime Minister can still command the trust of this House and the public?
Yeah, very well. I think there are unquestionably things that we did not know. And I listened incredibly carefully to the Prime Minister in PMQs today, and he was clear, and it was a personal statement for him, that he has felt lied to at every single stage of the process. And the precise reason why I think everybody in this House wants to see every single document published that we possibly can is to get to the bottom of that. But I believe the Prime Minister. I'll make some progress. All of us in this House deserve the truth. Everyone in the country deserves the truth. And most importantly of all, so does every victim. Mandelson's time in public life was a very dark chapter. It is the duty of this House to shine a light on it and give the public the answers that they absolutely deserve.
Thank you, Madam
Deputy Speaker. This situation stinks. Peter Mandelson maintained a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein after he had been convicted. This wasn't before anyone knew about his grotesque crimes, not when it was being whispered about, but after his conviction, when the world knew exactly who and what Jeffrey Epstein was. Yet before his appointment as ambassador to the United States, senior Labour MPs went on television and social media to praise him, members sitting opposite today. They knew the facts, because by that point, it was already public knowledge that Mandelson had stayed in Epstein's New York home while Epstein was serving time as a convicted paedophile. When asked about this last September, the Prime Minister told this House he had full confidence in Peter Mandelson, despite knowing about his close relationship with Epstein. That's right, the leader of the Labour Party and the Prime Minister had full confidence in a man that was besties with a convicted nonce. What a disgrace. And what we are witnessing is not accountability, it is the Westminster Club protecting its own. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is not just about this Labour government. Large sections of the media also play their part. Mandelson didn't simply drift back into public life, he was rehabilitated, rebranded, presented as respectable. He was welcomed on the BBC's flagship programme as a wiser elder statesman, given differential treatment by The Spectator, The Guardian and The Sunday Times. These are the same outlets that lecture relentlessly about standards and morality when it is a trade unionist, a protester, a working class person who puts a foot wrong. But when it's one of their own, the tone changes. Suddenly it's about experience, pragmatism, it's about getting things done. This is how power protects itself. And what about the victims, the girls and the young women abused by Epstein? They received an apology by Mandelson only after sustained pressure. It was not freely given, not offered because it was the right thing to do. And until recently, he still enjoyed the Zone 2 dinner party treatment, with magazine-style PR photos of Mandelson being published only this week. Then, Madam Deputy Speaker, there is the money. At least $75,000 was transferred from Epstein to Mandelson. He says he can't remember the transactions. If £75,000 landed in the bank account of almost anyone else in the country, they definitely would remember. To claim otherwise is contemptuous and goes to the heart of why trust in politics is collapsing. If those in power can't remember vast sums of money flowing into their accounts, then why should the public believe that they are acting in their public interest? Madam Deputy Speaker, this has only come to light because American authorities released the Epstein files. We are told that the UK has no record of Mandelson's emails. If those files hadn't been released, he would have sailed back into public life, shielded by friendly journalists and wealthy backers. That's how broken our political culture has become. And now further emails have emerged, raising serious questions about whether market-sensitive information was leaked while he was at the heart of government. When ordinary people make mistakes, they pay the price. Nurses are disciplined, teachers are suspended, care workers lose their jobs. But if you belong to the Westminster Club, you can be linked to one of the most notorious predators of our time and still reach the top.
Would the Honourable Member give way?
Yes.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. I wonder if she agrees with me that potentially every single working person, retired person and child of this country has paid the price for some of these comments. Because if Mandelson did indeed share information relating to the financial crash, it has cost everybody a fortune, and he owes every member of this country an apology.
I absolutely agree. This is a systemic issue, and that's why I support the calls for an independent, judge-led public inquiry. Madam Deputy Speaker, yes, Peter Mandelson was eventually removed as US Ambassador, but he remained in the House of Lords and as a Labour Party member until 3 days ago. So the Labour Party cannot pretend that this was some distant mistake quietly corrected a long time ago. This was a decision they defended until they were forced to abandon it, and he should never have been appointed in the first place. If this Labour government believes that the appointment was proper, then it should stop stonewalling and prove it. Publish all the documents, the vetting, the advice, the risk assessments, the correspondence, and the contracts, including Palantir. Instead, the Prime Minister tabled an amendment to withhold any papers deemed prejudicial to national security or international relations. We know that when governments face scrutiny, they wrap themselves up in the flag and hope that the public will look away. If there's nothing to hide, why carve out broad exemptions in advance? And the government's last-minute manuscript amendment is a desperate attempt to control dissent on the Labour backbenches. This is not accountability, it is not transparency, it's delay and it's damage control. They are kicking the can down the road in the hope that the outrage will fade and the questions will go away. Well, they won't. And that's why I'm supporting calls for an independent, judge-led public inquiry. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is not just about Peter Mandelson. It is about a system that protects the powerful and disregards the public. The victims deserved better, the British public deserve better. So the government must publish all the documents and the corruption and the cover-up and stop insulting the public with empty words when what we need is transparency. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister said he had full confidence in Peter Mandelson. While the public has no confidence in him, he should do the honourable thing and resign.
Madam Deputy Speaker, there is an old proverb. It may indeed be of Russian extraction, which maybe would be fitting enough. And it says this: tell me who your friend is, and I will tell you who you are. Yeah. And doesn't that sum up Peter Mandelson? Yeah. The friend of the child abuser, the friend of Jeffrey Epstein. He is the living personification of that proverb. He is a man apparently so corrupted in his own morals that he thinks what he did was okay, and perhaps corrupted financially. And that corruption, of course, is the product of his intoxication as a freeloader on the rich and the powerful. Yeah. And he has brought us to a very sorry pass indeed. But the abiding two words that will live from today relate to the Prime Minister, and they are, he knew. Yeah. Yeah. That is what will long outlive this debate. Yeah. He knew when he appointed him that he had this ongoing relationship with Epstein. He told us today, but he didn't know the depth of the relationship. Sorry, it's not about depth. It's not a question of scale. It's a question of, was there a relationship? Yeah. And the very fact there was should have been enough for any Prime Minister. Yeah. And that calls fundamentally into question the judgment of our Prime Minister. None. Our Prime Minister, and he is our Prime Minister, is a man who has to, on the world stage, make fine judgments. Day and daily, he has to make judgments that affect us all. And if on a matter so glaring as this, his judgment is patently and fatally flawed, then it does raise fundamental question of how we can trust the Prime Minister's judgment. Even those who knew Peter Mandelson tangentially would have had enough suspicions to question his appointment. We in Northern Ireland know something of him. He was our Secretary of State at the turn of the century for 2 years, until he had to resign over the passport application scandal. I then next encountered him when I was a member of the European Parliament, when he was the United Kingdom's Commissioner in the EU Commission, appointed then as the Trade Commissioner from 2004 to 2008. And that was not uncontroversial. 2006, I well remember, in the European Parliament, controversy about the fact that he had been holidaying on a yacht with an Italian tycoon whose business had benefited from his imposition of EU anti-dumping tariffs on Chinese shoes. And the Italian manufacturer of shoes was a beneficiary of those anti-dumping tariffs. And there he was, months later, on his yacht. Wow. 2 years later, he was on another yacht. Must be something about yachts. In Corfu, with a Russian oligarch. Mr. Mandelson, as Trade Commissioner, had just cut the EU import tariffs on aluminium, benefiting the oligarch company, Rusal, who were in the business, in the aluminium business. Yes, I'll do that.
Very grateful for giving way. Would you agree with me that there may be some considerable merit in both the Commission and the Parliament just looking over their paperwork to see precisely where these things link and whether he breached rules when he was serving as a Commissioner?
That's the point I was coming to. Sadly, maybe the European Union being the European Union, there was no great interest in investigating those matters. They were rather swept under the carpet. But I do say this to the government. He was there as the United Kingdom's Commissioner on the Commission. And I think that gives status and opportunity to venture into inquiries about those matters. And then, of course, he came back to be sacked again. Now, all of that is largely in the public domain. Before we come next or near Epstein, and yet equally in the public domain at the point of appointment was the knowledge that he had this ongoing relationship with a man who, upon his release from prison for his child abuse, Mandelson described it as his liberation. And our Prime Minister decided he was a suitable person to be our ambassador in probably the most important capital in the world, in Washington. That was a fatal flaw of judgment by the Prime Minister. And it will, I fear, hallmark much of his premiership. That a man who made a decision such as that, and then came to this House in September, when these things began to leak out, and expressed his confidence in Mandelson. So not just had we the flawed judgment in appointing him, we then had the continuing upholding of him by the expression of confidence, until finally the Prime Minister ran out of road on this issue. But he has left hanging around his neck that fatal flaw and misstep, and it's more than that, in appointing him. It was a fatal mistake, a flaw of judgment, and it does raise a fundamental point as to the ongoing credibility of this Prime Minister. And that is the abiding legacy of this situation.
Dr. Luke Evans.
Beware of Greeks bearing gifts. It's a slightly obscure quote, and it comes from a Trojan priest. And he was the one who spotted the warning, because many of you know the wider story of the Trojan horse. He said, beware of Greeks bearing gifts. Because actually, the moral of the story in terms of the Trojan horse was the fact that warnings were there and they were ignored. That's fundamental to what we're seeing here today, because Troy didn't fall because there was no warnings. It was because they were dismissed, sent away, ignored. The advice was ignored, and it led to catastrophe. Now let's apply that to our Prime Minister. today. He appointed an ambassador known literally for decades as the Dark Knight for operating behind the scenes. That was his reputation. Not only on that basis, he was sacked not once, but twice from his cabinet roles. So every instinct in me says no other member of Parliament, both on this side or the other, would think they are a suitable candidate to be ambassador of this great nation to one of our greatest allies. And we've heard we can't have more information because of national security.
Rubbish.
But this side of the House, we're not asking to see the blueprints of the horse or the set out of the blueprints of the walls of Troy. No. We're simply asking, was he warned before he wheeled through the Trojan horse that is Mandelson into government? Did he receive any information? Did he know anything? And when I was thinking about this point this morning, until we heard the Prime Minister speak today at Prime Minister's Questions, as has rightly been pointed out only in the speech before me, he did know. This isn't analogue or digital. He knew there were concerns, and yet he went on and made an appointment. So this is not about the intelligence that we're looking at, but actually the judgment to understand whether advice was given and whether it was followed. It's not how that advice was written, it's simply whether or not it was inferred, passed on, and ignored. Now, what hasn't been mentioned in this debate is that we've been round this once before. We had a Standing Order 24 debate, for those of you who remember, only just before Christmas. And at that time, I raised the point, why did the Prime Minister not come to the House? He is the one, by his own admission, who makes the decisions. He, therefore, knows all the answers. And when he came into government and he stood at the doors of number 10, he said he wanted to do things differently. All he has proved is that he doesn't have the leadership to come and answer the very questions that need to be put to him. Yet again, we're spending parliamentary time debating about whether there will be information released, which he knows himself. He could have spent the next 5 hours that we're going to spend debating this, answering the questions and setting this right. But instead, he's not here.
Hidden. Hiding.
Now, you'll often answer, well, convention states that no other prime ministers did it. Well, actually, some of them did. But more importantly, this Prime Minister said he was going to be different. This Prime Minister told us he wanted to see change.
On that point,
I will take an interview.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I found today shocking where the Prime Minister has openly admitted that he knew that Mandelson had an ongoing relationship with a convicted paedophile at the time he appointed him.
Yeah.
And anything else we discuss today, that goes against any value I stand for in my life, any value my constituents would stand for. Yeah. Does my honourable friend believe that it's untenable for the Prime Minister to stay in his position?
Yeah.
I think he's absolutely right, because as Troy fell because leaders ignored when the horse was at the gates, the advice given then, Prime Ministers fall for the same reason. And so he is either saying his judgment was so catastrophic that he didn't see what all of us have instinctively, or that he chose to ignore the information. And both of them, either outcome, are the problem facing us today.
Yeah.
Now, it's customary in these kind of debates for me to pose questions towards the ministerial team here. But actually, I'm not going to do that. My question is to the people behind them. Because why are we having a humble address? This is the very opportunity, the very literal reason we have humble addresses. They exist in moments like this for when there's stalling in scrutiny, when we can't get the answers that this House demands, when there's obfuscation and no way forward. We are asking today the monarch to compel the government to give that information out. And that's not important just for the party politics, but important for both sides of this House and the wider country. Now, the House And the motion doesn't ask the other side to condemn. It simply asks to clarify. We need to know who said what, when, why, who knew what, with whom, and what were the discussions. I think that's something that could be supported on all sides of the House.
Yeah.
Clarity is what a humble address strives for. Backbenchers are not being asked to defend or attack the appointment at all. They're simply being asked to step forward and vote for a motion that means all of us, here in this House and across the country, get to understand why the Prime Minister made his decision. Because if he won't come to the dispatch box and answer the questions to do so, maybe the very documentation that he's seen and signed off will show the answers. So I ask them on the other side of the House, do support this motion, do stand up for that simple transparency, and let's get some clarity on what has happened and what is going to happen going forward.
Sir Christopher Chair.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's a pleasure to follow my honourable friend, who participates a lot more frequently than I do in these opposition day debates, and on the basis of the quality of the debate today, I should come along more often. I must say that the background to this, the immediate background to this, is the ghastly behaviour of Epstein and the sexual abuse and the child trafficking and all that goes with it. And I asked the question the other day as to whether that sexual trafficking might involve not just women and girls but also young men. And I think that is unresolved at the moment, but perhaps we'll find out more in due course. But I wish to focus in my remarks on a period going back to 1997, Madam Deputy Speaker, long before you were able to recall much about politics, I know. But that was when Mandelson was first appointed by Tony Blair as the Minister without portfolio in charge of the Millennium Dome. And the reason I recall all this is because there was a time when I was the Shadow Minister for the Millennium Dome. And also, for that matter, the Shadow Minister for the Millennium Bug. I recall well the way in which the Mandelson enjoyed the opportunity to promote a grandiose New Labour scheme of this dome, which was, I think, going to be the fourth largest open enclosed space in the world. It cost in the end, I think, £750 million. The number of visitors who attended the Dome in the year 2000, which was half of what it had been estimated it was going to be. And Mandelson was really proud of this because it had a link with his grandfather, who must be turning in his grave, Herbert Morrison, a really great public servant. And his grandson has betrayed the public service in an enormous way. But Herbert Morrison was involved in the Festival of Britain. And so Mandelson thought that by being responsible for the Millennium Dome and promoting it, he would be able to, in a sense, emulate the great efforts of his grandfather. And so the project proceeded. And it was costing an enormous amount more than had been forecast by the Treasury or had been expected. So what happened was he was in the business of looking for sponsorship for the Dome. And that was when he used agents, and I think particularly Keith Vaz, who used to be a member of this House but left in disgrace. He used Keith Vaz and the Hindujas as a means of being able to get some extra income for his Dome project. And so what happened was that the Hindujas were able to offer £1 million for a faith centre inside the Dome. But of course, this didn't happen just by chance. This was linked with the fact that back in 1990, the Hinduja brothers had applied for British citizenship and had it rejected. And in 1998, with the new Labour government, they saw an opportunity to rectify that and to get their citizenship back. So what did they do? They engaged Keith Vaz. Through him, there were relationships with Mandelson, and the £1 million towards the dome was forthcoming. And in return, there was an acceleration of the passport application by Srihat Hinduja. He applied, I think, in the middle of '98, and his application was granted in January of 1999. Yeah. And that happened, and his brother's passport arrived not long after that. And there was an enormous amount of suspicion around all this. And I can remember, as the shadow minister for the Dome, trying to get us... I got a good story, actually, on the front page of the Sunday Times, linking Hinduja with Mandelson and the money for the Dome. And as soon as I got that, and I went off to thinking I'd be able to do the usual rounds, the whole story was closed down by Alistair Campbell and Mandelson, saying this was a whole load of rot. There was no truth in it whatsoever. We know that at the time there was a denial by Mandelson that he had any dealings with the Home Office on behalf of the Hindujas. Subsequently, there seemed to become evidence that there had been dealings, and what happened, and I think this is a message that we should bear in mind, and that is what happened was that an inquiry was set up into whether or not there had been dealings between the Secretary of State and with the Hindujas. And Sir Anthony, what was his name? Sir Anthony Hammond, a distinguished retired civil servant. I think he'd been in charge of the Home Office and as Treasury Solicitor. He was asked to produce a report, which he did in 2001. That report totally exculpated any involvement of either Mr. Vaz or of Mandelson in any wrongdoing. And then subsequent to that, a few weeks after that report had been published, which was a complete exoneration, then more papers were discovered, amazingly. And so what happened was that the inquiry by Sir Anthony Hammond was reopened, in itself quite an unusual event. And the inquiry was reopened, and what happened, the consequence was, he discovered, having looked at these extra papers that had been hidden away, he discovered that there had in fact been dealings between Mandelson and actually with Michael O'Brien, who was a very distinguished and honourable Labour member who served at that time in the Home Office. And so Mandelson had consistently lied, he covered up, he behaved in a way which is totally unacceptable. And that was all that time ago in 2002. That was when the revised report of Sir Anthony Hammond was produced. Yeah, of course.
I'm grateful to the member for allowing an intervention. He's giving a historical perspective, which we all appreciate, I'm sure. It seems that Mr. Mandelson is a serial liar. And this morning, would he agree that the Prime Minister had said that Mr. Mandelson lied to him and lied to him and lied to him? Who in this House has never been lied to?
I don't know how. I'm grateful to the Honourable Gentleman for his intervention. I don't know in his professional life. I don't know how much credibility he's given to people who he knows to be serial liars, and that is the issue. If one's on an interview panel, in a sense, that's what the Prime Minister was doing. He was interviewing his close friend for a job. And the essence of that was he must have known he was talking to somebody who was a serial liar. Of course I give way.
The other important point is there is one thing we know he didn't lie about, because the Prime Minister knew it and said he knew it today, was that he had continued his contact with Jeffrey Epstein after he'd been convicted as a paedophile. There was no lies in that, and the Prime Minister admitted he knew it. So defend that.
Shocking. My honourable friend makes a sort of typical point that's made in court when you've got the defendant is found out to be lying, and so you address the jury and say he's lied about that, members of the jury. How can you trust him to be telling the truth about the charge which he's facing in the court? In public office, serial liars should not be tolerated. Yeah. I give way.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way. Perhaps I could rephrase the question he's had from the benches opposite.
Go on.
How was the Prime Minister to know that the famous serial liar, Peter Mandelson, was going to lie to him?
If the Prime Minister was here, he'd be able to answer that question, I'm sure.
I suspect he's told you.
So that's where what has always amazed me, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm sure a lot of others, is how is it that Mandelson has continued to rise again from the ashes after each disgrace? And I will, yes, okay.
I'm grateful to you giving way. And could you potentially tell us what we can learn about some of the documentation and the way the investigation ran back then? Because as he pointed out in his speech, there were papers and he was exonerated, yet there were papers found and then suddenly he was guilty. Would it be helpful to understand what needs to be done today's debate to make sure that we have the information right as we need to be able to make the inferred decisions and understanding behind what's going on?
I'm grateful for that. I was going to conclude by saying I go along with those people who have been calling for a public inquiry, because a public inquiry would be able to require the production of the documents. And we know from this Sir Anthony Hammond's experience that a non-judicially led public inquiry can't necessarily get access to all the documents that are needed. And I don't think we want to have some whitewash inquiry by the Cabinet Office and then a couple of years later find out that they didn't have all the documents in front of them. So I think that's the argument in favour of having a public inquiry. But the other point I really wanted to make was that how is it that this Teflon-coated Mandelson has continued to be able to hold high office in the Labour Party for all those years? And that's why I think that one of the most important speeches in the Chamber today was a speech from the Honourable Member for Leeds East. Because he and the Honourable Member for Islington, Right Honourable Member for Islington North, know what it's like to be on the receiving end of the Stasi, in this case, the New Labour Stasi. And I think that the only explanation I can find for the fact that Mandelson continued to be reinstated after all this bad behaviour is that he was seen as a key member of the New Labour Stasi, an enforcer, and somebody who was very plausible, well-connected, and knew how to ingratiate himself with the rich and powerful. I give way to my right honourable friend.
Not only was he a key member of New Labour, he was the inventor of New Labour. He was the man who came up with replacing whatever the implements were of horny-handed toil on the Labour flag with the red rose. He was the brander par excellence. And I think also people were afraid of him. I'm not the first person to describe this as the Scandalson story, and I'm sure I won't be the last.
Yes, hear.
Well, I'm sorry I understated the proposition, and my right honourable friend is quite right to correct me on that. And I think that if we had a public inquiry, we'd be able to extend the terms of reference of that public inquiry into Mandelson's influence over the internal politics of the Labour Party over those last 30 years. Wouldn't that be interesting? I give way to my honourable.
My honourable friend is making a great speech about the influence of Mandelson within the Labour Party. It's currently being reported that he has been involved in the selection of many of the new candidates, up to 25%. Do you think that those documents should be made available of anybody that he's helped recruit into the Labour Party?
They're not here to defend them.
I am having difficulty hearing the debate. Sir Christopher Chope.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think what you were hearing was the incredulity being expressed by my honourable friends at this revelation that this man, who was so discredited already, has had such an influence in the choice of candidates, many of whom have been successfully elected at the last general election. I don't know how they're going to be voting in this debate this evening, but it's extraordinary that Mandelson has had this enduring influence and over politics in this country for such a long time, and it's taken essentially the production of documents in the United States to enable us to be able to get somewhere near the truth.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. The government tried to stop full disclosure of documents today, and members opposite, I think primarily, identified that, said they wouldn't put up with it, and it's thanks to them there's a manuscript amendment. But there may still be a misunderstanding, because the member for Welwyn Hatfield said that the ISC would be vetting the documents before they were released. That's not my understanding. The truth is they may get to see them, however inappropriate it is that they're not published to the whole House. And does my honourable friend agree with me? Ministers need to set out today that can be not only referred to the ISC, but the ISC, if it agrees that that document should be made public and it doesn't see it as injurious to our security, then they should be released.
Absolutely. And we've got to erode this cancer which is affecting our public life and the esteem in which public servants are held. And when the public see what has happened over this period of time, in the Mandelson case, they must be horrified. And of course I could wait. Yes.
Way. I'm a member of the 2024 entry, and I'm very grateful I've never had to meet the cretin that is Peter Mandelson. But can I just be clear? Party politics aside, or not, actually. I didn't join the Labour Party because I hold anyone in high esteem who has led the party, influenced the party. I joined the Labour Party for two very important reasons. One, the welfare state is one of the most important things this country has ever done, and the National Health Service. Now, I think it's dangerous when we hold someone in such high esteem and we give so much power to so few people that things like this are allowed to happen. But let me be also very clear. My faith in the Labour Party to continue to deliver for people of this country continues. My faith in people like Peter Mandelson, I am very, very grateful that he is no longer a member of this party.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for her intervention, and I'm certainly not going to make any accusations about her owing any patronage to Peter Mandelson. And it seems from what she says that she's going to join those of us in this House who are independently minded and express our views in a straightforward manner. But let us be clear, it's obvious that a lot of people on her side who were elected at the same 2024 general election, they were chosen by panels which included Mandelson. And this is not just an exclusive problem for the Labour Party, but we must recognise in our democracy that the people who choose the candidates have enormous power. And if those people who are choosing the candidates are corrupt, as in the case of Mandelson has now been established, then that puts grave doubt upon the credibility of our democratic institutions. Of course I will.
Friend for giving way, but actually, according to reports, it's worse than that where Peter Mandelson had his fingertips through the whole of the Labour Party, but also the government, because there are reports that he was actually, after the Prime Minister had realised that he still had a continuing relationship with Epstein, was in number 10 during the cabinet reshuffle of the 5th of September. So actually, he has had a direct role in appointing half the cabinet, hasn't he?
Well, these revelations keep coming, and the answers come there none, and I hope that in due course we'll be able to pursue these points further with the Prime Minister when he next appears in the House. I give way to my honourable friend.
What we're talking about really here with this appointment of Mandelson really is the judgment of the Prime Minister. And when we look at the judgment of him appointing Mandelson, that he's now a key part in the Starmer government, in appointments, what goes on, the key people, it begs into question every judgment of this Prime Minister, from Chagos to China to the Northern Ireland Troubles Act. This today, I would say, is the crumbling of Starmer. His judgment is poor. His judgment is ruining this country and the Labour Party.
My right honourable friend is absolutely right. It's fundamental. Judgment and discretion and the way we behave, and that's part of our character, and we know that the character is set quite early in life, and certainly we can see from the case of Mandelson that it hasn't changed in all the time that he was being involved in public life and public service, so-called. And so what the point I'm just going to make, and I'm going to finish in a minute, but what is... It's only because of what has been revealed in the United States that we are now in a position to know that he's no longer Lord Mandelson, no longer the Right Honourable Lord Mandelson. Yes, I'll give way here.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. In order that the Minister can have time to prepare and perhaps find out if he doesn't already know, does my honourable friend agree that he should find out, was Mandelson in number 10 Downing Street at the time of the last government reshuffle? Was he involved? Were his fingers involved in the appointment of ministers on that Treasury bench? And if he's able to tell us later categorically that he wasn't, that will be a relief to this House.
And if we can't get a straight answer from the government to that my honourable friend's question, then that's another reason why I would say that we need to have a public inquiry. I give way to my honourable friend.
You mentioned the revelation coming out of emails. The point I made earlier, which I think is also very important for the Minister to answer, is actually the government could have asked the Department of Justice in the States, is there anything in the emails that haven't been released that relates to Mandelson that could affect our decision to appoint him? There was nothing stopping them approaching the DOJ and asking that. It's vital that we know whether they did or not.
That's another very good point that's been made, and I'm sure it will be picked up on the Treasury bench and they will respond accordingly. But we have to thank our mercies in a sense that Mandelson has been exposed finally, and it wasn't just that exposure outside George Osborne's house. Yes, of course I would. Yeah.
Thank you very much for giving way. I very much enjoyed the history lesson about a man who has a history of misfeasance in public office. And I've spoken in this House about my surprise at his appointment as the US ambassador, which is an incredibly important relationship for this country. Listening to the debate, it makes me reflect on the importance of parts of our Constitution which give us freedom of speech and freedom of the press. Two incredibly important things, and I think we all owe a great vote of thanks and gratitude to Elon Musk and X, who has played his part in exposing a great deal of this evil.
My honourable friend makes his point in his own way. I would just draw attention to the fact that this is Freedom 250 is how the United States is describing the 250th anniversary of independence in their celebrations. And the points he makes about freedom really resonate well both sides of the Atlantic, and we must never forget that. And we could have been involved with having our representative in the United States during this historic year as being none other than Mandelson. So we must thank everybody who's been involved in trying to bring the revelations to light which have shamed the Prime Minister, because I think the Prime Minister in the end was shamed into sacking him rather than exercising his own judgment. I give way once more.
Does my honourable and very experienced friend believe that one of the lessons of inherent necessity for political survival is the ability to learn from mistakes? And therefore, given that a new ambassador will be taking Mandelson's place, I don't think a permanent appointment has yet been made. Does he think the Prime Minister will have enough good sense and wit to appoint a diplomatic professional to the role, or will it be another ill-starred flunky that he favours for political and personal reasons?
Probably.
Well, actually, I'm grateful for my right honourable friend's intervention, but actually I think the appointment has been made. I met the gentleman concerned, who is an esteemed member of the diplomatic corps, and he was present at Mr. Speaker's dinner in honour of the Speaker of the House of Representatives 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I think we are in safer, more secure hands there. But that's a good note on which to. I think I'll go once more.
In relation to, during the debate we've heard that there is a new manuscript amendment coming forward, at which it says shall instead be referred to the Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament. Does he share my concern, however? All that information that we've been requested for in this amendment is going to go there. We as yet have not heard from the government what would actually happen with that, where the reports would come, what would be done, and what the judgment is about whether or not an embarrassment for a Labour government is different to a security side of things, indifferent to an international relation. Does he share my concern without the government setting out what that framework may look like? It's quite hard to vote this through without losing the risk of having transparency.
Well, I'm not going to suggest we don't vote in support of our own motion, frankly. And I'm sure that we know from the course of this debate that a lot more questions are being raised, and in due course, I think with the forensic leadership shown by the Leader of the Opposition, we will be able to get to the bottom of these issues and get the answers which we deserve. But in the meantime, it's quite frustrating for people. And I'm just going to finish on a final note, and that is, I didn't go to Oxford, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I think we should show solidarity with the people of Oxford University, who had the wisdom not to elect Mandelson as the Chancellor of that university.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a great honour to follow my honourable friend from Christchurch, who I have to say was one of his shorter speeches that I'm Look, we come here for a very serious matter of one of the most utmost gravity. I've heard a number of really good speeches from all sides of the House, including members of the opposite benches, and I do commend all the members who've stood up and said, because it's not an easy thing to do, all of the members who have stood up and said that they're not happy with the government's position. I am very, very pleased that we've got to a point where there is a manuscripted amendment now that will force the hand of the government and make sure that the ISC has a pivotal and critical role to play. But I do want to pick up on a number of members who made some points that I do agree with and some that I don't. And while I agreed with a lot of the points that were said today, I did notice that a couple of members did say the government got here because they demonstrated leadership. They did not demonstrate leadership. No. They got here because they were dragged here to do so. They got here because there was a dump of documents by the DOJ, and the Leader of the Opposition tabled a motion which forced their hand, which meant that members opposite had to finally confront the fact that the Lord Mandelson, Peter Mandelson, had a relationship with Epstein for much longer than many of us knew, but certainly the Prime Minister knew. As we found out earlier today. But this idea that the government has demonstrated leadership is for the birds. And it's important, by the way. It's important because I've heard members across the House talk about the victims of Epstein. But I say to members opposite, they are just words if you do not follow them up with action. Yeah. And while the ISC amendment is important today, that is not the end of the journey. Yeah. Because for months now, we have been pushing on this side of the House to get clarity and find out the truth as to what has been going on with the appointment of Lord Mandelson. This goes right to the heart of our politics. And what did we find out today when the Leader of the Opposition challenged the Prime Minister? He'd run out of road, and he finally had to come clean that he knew about his relationship. And this idea that you need to know the depths of the relationship. I asked the members opposite, what is the depth of a relationship with a paedophile that you need to have before it becomes eligible for declaration?
I think the fact that the Prime Minister resisted giving that answer for so long proves the fact he knows it's incredibly damaging to his judgment, that he didn't want people to know that he had known and appointed him anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's. I agree with my honourable friend, and we were sat together in the debate reflecting on some of the speeches. And when we talk about, I think it was the Health Secretary who talked about the toxic culture at number 10. Well, this debate, that amendment was a demonstration of that toxic culture, because it wasn't for the victims of Jeffrey Epstein that amendment was put forward. It was to protect the Prime Minister. Now, of course, I get. Absolutely.
And does my honourable friend agree with me that actually to try and focus on